She left, without warning. No resignation, no speech, no tears. And 5 years later, she walked right back through the doors of the company that once crushed her, with nothing but her voice, her mind, and her name. No one knew what to say, not even the man who broke her. Welcome back to Mr. Charles Stories. If you've ever been silenced, underestimated, or humiliated by someone in power, someone who once needed you but treated you like you didn't matter, this story is yours. Hit that like button, tap subscribe, and stay until the final word, because what Jasmine does next, she doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't seek revenge. She simply walks in like she owns her silence. And that silence, it's what finally broke the CEO who once thought he was untouchable. The elevator dinged softly. No one in the lobby looked up until she stepped out. Jasmine Rhodes, hair pulled into a sleek bun, plum lipstick, a navy jumpsuit that said she didn't dress to please, only to lead. She moved with a kind of calm that unnerved people who weren't used to women walking like they owed no one an explanation. Phones lowered. Side whispers started. The front desk manager stood slowly. "Ms. Rhodes?" Jasmine nodded once. "The board requested I meet them in executive conference. Say, yes, ma'am. You know the way." Oh, she knew it. Every hallway, every badge tone, every glass wall where they used to stare through her brilliance like it was borrowed. She didn't need directions. She needed space. Colton Bryce stood by the boardroom window, arms folded, pretending to review market charts on a large monitor. But he wasn't seeing numbers. He was waiting for the door to open. He had known she was coming. The board made that clear. They brought in Rhodes' theory to help restore public confidence after the fallout from the supplier scandal. He didn't expect them to bring her. He didn't expect Jasmine. The woman he once called his right hand. The woman whose lips he'd tasted, and then disrespected in front of an entire boardroom just 72 hours later. She didn't knock. She walked in like she'd never left. And for a split second, everyone forgot how to breathe. "Good morning," she said, sliding a folder across the polished oak table. "Let's get started." Colton stared. Jasmine didn't look at him. Not once. That hit harder than he expected. "I've already reviewed the brand fallout reports," Jasmine said, her tones steady, efficient, emotionless. "I see 3 central problems: language, leadership, and lack of ownership." No one interrupted her, not even the board chairman. Her voice had weight now. Not desperation, not hope, just clarity. Colton listened from the far end. He tried to focus on the charts, the phrases, the talking points, but all he could think about was the way her eyes had passed over him, like he was a stranger, like she didn't have history under his skin. "She's good," one of the board members whispered to another. "She always was," Colton murmured, before he could stop himself. Jasmine caught the comment. Her gaze shifted once, quickly, to meet his. Then just as fast, she turned her focus back to the task. She wasn't here for him. She was here to fix what he couldn't. After the meeting, Jasmine stepped out into the hallway. Her heels clicked softly on the marble. She paused at the same spot where 5 years ago she'd dropped her ID badge on the floor and walked out without saying goodbye. The assistant manager from HR passed her with a half smile. Jasmine didn't stop. Colton exited moments later, watching her from behind. She stood near the tall glass windows, looking out at the skyline. He wanted to say something, but what could he possibly say? 5 years ago, she gave him her loyalty, her brilliance, and a piece of her heart. He gave her silence, public silence, private rejection. Now, she was back, and he couldn't seem to find the words that once came so easily to him when he had power. "Jasmine." She turned her head, slowly. "Let's keep this professional," she said. "We have work to do." Colton nodded, but his hands, they trembled. Later that evening, long after the office emptied, Jasmine stayed behind. The server had glitched, and she needed to manually retrieve a brand sequence file. Alone in the conference room, lit by the glow of her laptop, she looked like something ethereal. Colton stepped in, holding 2 coffees. He placed one near her without a word. She didn't touch it. I never forgot that night, he said quietly. She didn't flinch, didn't even pause typing. I did. He took a deep breath. You meant too much. That's why I did what I did. She finally looked up, her expression unreadable. I didn't want to feel that kind of pull, he continued. Especially not here. Especially not with you. She studied him. So, you humiliated me in a room full of men who already doubted me. I know, he said, voice thin. You buried me, she whispered. Colton stepped closer, eyes searching hers. I'm sorry. She stood, walked past him, paused at the door. I loved you once, she said over her shoulder, but I love myself more now. She didn't slam the door. She didn't leave a folder. She didn't say, we'll talk tomorrow. She simply left, and for the first time in years, Colton Bryce stood in his own office, unsure of how to move, because Jasmine wasn't trying to prove anything. Her presence alone shattered everything he once believed he controlled. Colton sat in the dim light of his office, the untouched coffee still warm in his hand. The door had closed behind Jasmine 10 minutes ago, but the silence she left behind was louder than any door slam. He'd seen women leave before, angry, teary, demanding closure. But Jasmine wasn't any of those women. She hadn't cried. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't even looked back. That made it worse. He glanced at the coffee she left untouched. Jasmine didn't need caffeine. She ran on control, precision, boundaries. She always had. That was why he'd been drawn to her. That was why he ruined everything. The irony wasn't lost on him. The board hadn't called him when the company's reputation tanked. They'd called the woman he once tried to silence. The next morning, she was already in the conference room when he arrived. Colton paused at the doorway. Jasmine didn't greet him. Her laptop was open. Her notes were spread out in crisp layers. She was reviewing metrics from the latest campaign with quiet focus. I'd like to update the rollout plan, he said, stepping inside. I've already handled it, she replied without looking up. The problem wasn't execution, it was language. He shifted. Language. Jasmine finally raised her eyes. The public doesn't trust cold corporate apologies. They trust people who sound like they're telling the truth. Colton opened his mouth, closed it. She continued, I sent a draft to the legal team. They'll vet it before the board meeting. Efficient as always, he said, trying to soften the tension. Her gaze didn't flinch. I didn't come back to impress you, Colton. I came to fix what you let fall apart. He nodded slowly. I know. Silence filled the space between them. This time, she broke it. You know, it wasn't just what you did in that meeting 5 years ago. He blinked. It was that you didn't say anything after. Not a call. Not a note. You let me vanish. His voice was low. I didn't think I had the right to reach out. She stood, gathering her files. You didn't. But that doesn't mean it didn't matter. Before he could respond, her phone buzzed. She glanced down. I have another meeting with finance. Colton stepped aside as she walked past him. The scent of her perfume followed, sharp and clean, like citrus and clarity. He watched her go. Again, it was becoming a pattern. Later that day, the board meeting was tense. Jasmine took the lead, presenting a full analysis of the company's brand, erosion and how public trust had plummeted since the scandal broke. She didn't sugarcoat anything. What shocked Colton wasn't her tone. It was how the board listened. When she spoke, they leaned forward, took notes, asked real questions. Colton couldn't remember the last time he held their attention like that. She didn't wield authority, she embodied it. After the meeting, one of the senior board members clapped a hand on his shoulder. She's exactly what this place needed, he said. Smart move bringing her in. Colton gave a tight smile. He hadn't brought her in. The board had. That evening he found himself scrolling through Jasmine's company site, Rhodes Theory. Every headline felt like a mirror held to him. We don't repair egos. We repair credibility. The public isn't forgiving. They're observant. You don't get a second chance to lie better, just a final chance to lead better. He shut his laptop and leaned back in his chair. Somewhere in Seattle, she had built this. Alone. He remembered the woman who used to take the train home because she didn't have a car, who once skipped dinner to finish pitch decks for his deadlines, who stood by him when the first competitor lawsuit nearly sank their stock value. And how did he repay her? By taking the only thing she had left, her voice in a room where she earned her seat. He didn't expect her to forgive him, but he hadn't expected the regret to feel this heavy either. 2 days later, they crossed paths again in the elevator, just the two of them. Jasmine stood still, eyes fixed ahead. He was tempted to speak, to reach for her. Instead, he pressed the floor number and stayed silent. But before the doors opened, she spoke. "You want to say something?" He turned toward her. "I do." She raised an eyebrow, still not facing him. "I don't know how to say it in a way that doesn't sound too late," he admitted. Her voice was cool. "Then maybe don't say anything at all." The elevator doors opened. She stepped out. He didn't follow. In her absence, the floor felt colder. Jasmine didn't raise storms. She shifted tides. And every time she walked away from him, he felt further from the man he thought he was. She hadn't come back to start something again. She'd come back to finish what he never gave her space to complete, her own narrative. Colton knew then. She was no longer the woman who worked for him. She was the woman he would have to work toward, if he ever wanted another chance. And for the first time in his career, he didn't know if he was qualified. Colton stared out of his office window, the city skyline glittering below like nothing had changed. But everything had. Jasmine's presence in the building was doing more than shifting boardroom energy. It was pulling up buried parts of him, pieces he thought he'd discarded the moment she walked out 5 years ago. Parts that felt too human, too vulnerable. He used to be able to control the pace of a room, walk in and silence it, speak, and people listened. But now, people were quoting her. Executives who once took his word as gospel were staying after meetings to ask her for clarification. Colton wasn't used to being outshined, especially not by someone who used to work under him, especially not by someone he never got over. Downstairs in the strategy suite, Jasmine was already deep into her next briefing. Her team from Seattle had flown in, 2 young associates and a data analyst, bright minds who moved fast and spoke straight, just like her. Jasmine stood at the whiteboard, mapping out public sentiment metrics. She moved with such confidence that her team barely noticed how everyone in the office paused to watch her work. Colton passed by the open glass. His steps slowed, but he didn't enter. He watched. The way she carried herself, the ease, the authority. She was everything the younger Jasmine had wanted to become, and more. He remembered a moment years ago when he had asked her what she wanted to be in 5 years. "I want to be somewhere I don't have to shrink to make others feel tall." She had said it without hesitation, without a smile, like a vow. She had meant him, even back then. Later that afternoon, they found themselves alone in the same elevator again. She pressed the floor number without looking at him. "I owe you something," he said, voice low. She didn't respond. "I read your interview." In the equity report last year, her gaze flicked to him for the first time. "You said something that stayed with me." Jasmine folded her arms. "I said a lot of things." He nodded. "You said, some betrayals don't need to be loud to leave scars." Her eyes stayed on his face, unblinking. "It wasn't about you." "I know," he said, "but it fit." A pause. She looked away again. Most truths do. The elevator doors opened. She stepped out first, and again he stayed behind. That night, he lay in bed unable to sleep. The regret didn't come from losing her. It came from never even trying to keep her. She had been everything he wasn't, open, honest, unafraid to feel, and he punished her for that. 5 years ago, Jasmine had stayed late to help prep the biggest presentation of the quarter. She skipped dinner, wrote half the deck, pitched him edits while the office lights dimmed one by one. They had stood shoulder to shoulder by the window, the city sprawling below. "It's going to go well," she had said, tucking a pen behind her ear. He looked at her. "It always does when you're involved." She smiled, and it lingered. just enough to pull him in. That night, they kissed, and the kiss became a touch. The touch turned into a moment that broke the walls between them. But Monday morning came fast. He stood at the head of the boardroom table, presenting a version of her work without acknowledging her once. And when she raised a point, he interrupted. Then he handed credit for the proposal to a senior strategist with half her vision. When she caught his eyes across the table, they were blank. She left the building that afternoon, quiet, unannounced, and he had let her go. Back in the present, Jasmine sat across from a new marketing team. She was calm, calculating, and decisive. She didn't defer. She didn't soften her words. When Colton entered the room, she didn't pause. She kept leading. That, more than anything, struck him. She wasn't trying to reclaim the past. She had built something better. After the meeting, he followed her into the hallway. "I know you don't owe me a conversation." She stopped walking. "Then don't ask for one." He took a breath. "I'm not the same man." She raised a brow. "No. Now you tremble when I speak." The truth of it hit harder than he wanted to admit. "Jasmine." He swallowed. "Do you even remember how it felt, back then?" She looked him straight in the eye. "I remember everything. The way your hand touched my back when you thought no one could see. The way you said my name like it was a secret. The way you stood up and made me feel like I didn't belong in a room I built." He opened his mouth. Closed it. "You want me to forget," she added. "But forgetting is a luxury I didn't have. I had to live with it. Build on top of it. And now you want a different version of me. I want any version of you that lets me make things right." Jasmine shook her head. "You don't make things right by wanting me again. You make them right by never treating another woman the way you treated me." The moment sat in the air between them. Sharp, clean, final. She walked away. And this time, Colton didn't follow. Because deep down, he knew he was no longer chasing the woman she used to be. He was chasing the man she once believed he could become. Colton didn't attend the next 2 strategic meetings. He told himself it was to give Jasmine space. But the truth? He couldn't take the look in her eyes. That quiet knowing. The way she didn't flinch when speaking truth to a room of men who used to ignore her. He remembered what she once told him when they worked late one night in the research wing. If a woman has to be quiet to stay respected, it's not respect. It's fear disguised as decorum. He had nodded back then, acting like he understood. But he didn't. Not really. Not until he saw her again. Not until she stood in the same building where she'd once been invisible. Now commanding every inch of space like it was built for her. On the 3rd day, he forced himself to walk into the branding alignment session. He didn't announce himself, just walked in and stood along the back wall. Jasmine noticed. Of course she did. But she didn't pause. She didn't shift. She kept moving through her pitch deck, refining key messaging points to address the company's internal accountability plan. Her voice never shook. Colton watched the new marketing VP hang on her every word. Jasmine wasn't there to entertain them. She was there to rebuild the public trust they had shattered without her. Afterward, as people filed out, Jasmine collected her notes in silence. Colton waited until the room was nearly empty. "You never once asked me what I went through after you left," he said quietly. Jasmine kept organizing her files. "That's because I didn't think you went through anything." He moved a little closer. "I did. I had to carry the shame of knowing I broke the one good thing I didn't deserve." She looked at him then. "Shame is internal. What you gave me was public." Colton blinked. "I had to watch people pretend I never existed," she said. "You don't know what it's like to sit in silence while others repurpose your work like it was theirs all along." "I do now," he muttered. She let out a quiet laugh, not amused. "You think watching me shine now is punishment? This isn't about you, Colton. It never was." He ran a hand down his jaw. "Then why does it still feel like everything in this building pulls me back to you?" She shrugged. "Maybe because you never dealt with what you did. You moved on without ever admitting you were wrong. I didn't know how." Jasmine gathered the last folder. "And I had to learn how to survive without waiting on your apology." That's the difference. She walked out before he could say more. Later that night, Colton reviewed the numbers. Shareholder confidence had begun inching upward. The sentiment report from their latest social listening campaign showed a 13% positive swing in just under a week. Jasmine's approach was working, but the data wasn't what kept him up. It was the look on her face when she said she had to survive without him. She didn't just leave back then. She had to learn how to become someone new, on her own terms. He'd stayed in the same penthouse, same office, same skyline view. She had built everything from scratch. He opened a browser and typed her name again. Jasmine Rhodes, Rhodes Theory. More interviews, more features, a profile piece in Forbes Women. One quote stood out in bold. "The people who thought they erased me don't realize I made peace with their silence. I turned it into a strategy." He leaned back. Damn, she wasn't bitter. She was whole. And he was just beginning to understand the weight of what she carried all these years. The next morning, Jasmine entered the media briefing at exactly 9 a.m., a black folder tucked beneath her arm, sleeves rolled, no jewelry. She didn't need it. Her presence was polished enough. Colton was already seated at the end of the table. When their eyes met, something subtle passed between them. Not tension, not anger, recognition. He didn't interrupt her presentation this time. He didn't attempt to take over. When she finished, he raised his hand like everyone else. "I have a question," he said. Jasmine nodded. "Go ahead." What happens when the damage is personal, not just corporate? There was a pause in the room. Jasmine set her clicker down and stepped toward the head of the table. "Then the apology has to match the harm," she said. "And the person responsible has to do the work, not just say the words." Colton lowered his gaze. "Thank you." She moved on, unshaken. After the session, he stayed behind while the others left. Jasmine knew he would. She walked past him, ready to head out. But he spoke again. "You changed." She turned, slowly. "So did you." "Not enough." She tilted her head. "Then what are you waiting for?" He took a step closer, a chance to try. Jasmine paused, then gave a small, measured nod. "Then don't waste my time. I don't offer space to people who only want access, Colton. I offer it to people who've learned how to show up." He nodded once, and for the first time since she returned, she didn't walk away first. That night, he stayed late again. Alone in his office, staring at the skyline, he whispered the truth out loud for no one to hear. "I loved her, I ruined her, and somehow, she still became everything I couldn't." Have you ever had to stand face to face with someone who once shattered your confidence and pretend you weren't still bleeding underneath? What would you do if the person who humiliated you was now trying to earn your respect? Drop a comment. Would you forgive someone who buried your voice in public just because they found their guilt in private? Tap like if Jasmine's strength is something you admire. Share this video. If you know someone who needs to hear, you don't have to raise your voice to reclaim your worth. You just have to stop shrinking for people who never deserved your light. And if you haven't yet, hit subscribe, because what Jasmine does next changes everything. By Monday morning, the whispers around the office weren't whispers anymore. People had started taking notes the way Jasmine did. Executives were quoting her phrases in meetings. Even the interns stopped looking to Colton for approval. They waited to hear what Jasmine thought first. She hadn't demanded leadership. She'd simply become it. Colton noticed every shift. It wasn't just that she was brilliant. She always had been. What struck him now was that she didn't ask for credit anymore. She gave answers, set standards, left silence in places where most people filled space with noise. He watched her from across the room during a department briefing. Her eyes scanned a printout as she pointed out weak spots in the public-facing messaging. Calm, direct, respectful but not soft. "No one trusts a brand that hides behind the word unforeseen," she said. "Say what happened. Say who was responsible. Then say what's changing." Someone objected. "But we don't want to sound too exposed." She looked at him flatly. "That's exactly why your apology sounds like spin." The room stilled. And then, slowly, one of the PR directors nodded. She's right. The man who objected didn't push further. Jasmine didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. After the session, Colton caught up with her in the corridor. That was impressive. She didn't stop walking. That was necessary. He smiled slightly. You always did see through the polished excuses. Jasmine turned her head, eyes narrowing. I had to. I was expected to explain my worth every time I walked into a room. That sharpens your clarity. He fell into step beside her. I miss working with you. She shot him a look. You didn't act like it back then. Colton stopped walking. I didn't know how to admit what I felt. Not in front of everyone. Not even to myself. She kept moving. That's not an excuse. That's a confession with no change attached. He sighed. I'm trying. Trying doesn't erase damage, she said, glancing back over her shoulder. But it's a start. In her makeshift project office, Jasmine laid out a week-long roadmap with her Seattle team. Everything was moving. Campaigns restructured. Leadership briefings improved. Public sentiment was shifting in real time. But internally, Jasmine wasn't untouched. Late at night, when the building emptied, she sometimes paused longer than needed after logging off. Sometimes she'd just sit there, staring at the framed skyline view she once dreamed of reaching. This place used to feel like the finish line. Now, it just felt like a checkpoint. When one of her analysts asked if she'd consider staying on full-time, Jasmine smiled politely and said, "We'll see." She already knew the answer. Her value wasn't tied to this place anymore. But Colton was still tethered to it. His name on the glass. His legacy in the headlines. His face in the scandals. And now, his pride was standing face to face with the woman he once dismissed, and realizing she might be the only person who could carry this brand into a future worth believing in. That evening, Jasmine stayed late reviewing client sentiment analytics. The lights in her suite were dimmed, but one monitor still glowed. She sat curled in a chair, heels off, expression focused. Colton knocked once before stepping inside. She didn't look up. "I thought you'd gone home." "I was going to," he said. "Then I remembered you used to stay until everything felt solid enough to walk away from." Her lips curved slightly. "I still do." He sat across from her. Quiet. "I've been watching," he said after a moment. "Not just what you do, how you move, how people listen." She looked at him now. And I'm realizing I mistook your quiet for permission." Jasmine tilted her head. "You're not the first man to make that mistake, but I don't want to be the kind who repeats it." She nodded once. "Then don't." A pause. Colton leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Do you ever think about how things might have gone if I'd handled it differently?" "I used to," she said simply. "But that version of me, the one who waited for your apology, doesn't exist anymore. And this version? She doesn't need your apology, but she'll still remember if you gave one." Colton swallowed. "I'm sorry. Not rushed, not dramatic, just truth." Jasmine let the words settle between them. "Good," she finally said. "Now, let's see if your actions start matching them." He gave a small nod. "You always were the one who made me want to be better. I didn't want to change you, Colton. I wanted you to stop hiding behind your image." She stood and slipped her shoes back on. "This company needs to heal," she said, "but that doesn't mean you and I do." And with that, she left him in the quiet again. He didn't chase her. Not this time. Because some things aren't fixed by closing the distance. They're only fixed by proving you deserve to be invited back into the space you once shattered. Colton arrived earlier than usual the next morning. The office was still quiet, the air fresh with that sterile calm that comes before a workday begins. Normally, he used the time to review projections or skim press coverage, but today he walked straight into the executive floor's break room and stood still. For the first time in years, he made coffee, not for himself, but for the two. Interns who were always overlooked and never spoken to by anyone at the top. When they entered the room and found him there, pouring cream into paper cups, both froze. "You two work late every night," Colton said without smiling. Just figured you deserved something that wasn't brewed 5 hours ago. They blinked. Thank you, Mr. Bryce. It's Colton, he said. And don't burn yourselves. As he walked out, he didn't expect anything in return. No reaction, no praise. That wasn't the point. For years, he'd thought leadership was about being followed. Now, watching Jasmine operate, he saw what real power looked like. It was in making people feel seen. He checked in on the copywriting team next, asking how feedback was being applied to new messaging. He didn't insert himself. He just listened. One of the junior writers whispered to a colleague as he left, "Is he different lately?" That whisper followed him into the boardroom, where Jasmine was already mid-presentation. She gave a brief nod when he entered. No smile, no reaction. But she didn't pause either. That was something. He took a seat and let himself be a participant instead of a centerpiece. Jasmine wrapped up her presentation with a simple, clean breakdown of the next 72-hour rebranding push. "Expect results," she said. "But don't expect miracles unless your work reflects them." The room fell quiet, then broke into soft claps. Someone from finance raised their hand. "Ms. Rhodes, do you see a scenario where we extend this partnership beyond this month?" Jasmine looked to Colton. He didn't speak. He didn't tilt his head or interrupt. He let her decide. "I was brought in to do a job," she said, "not to settle into comfort." The answer was neutral, controlled, but it said enough. Colton respected it. Later that day, he stepped into the hallway as Jasmine ended a call outside her temporary office. She looked up when she saw him. "May I?" he asked, nodding toward her space. She held the door open, expression unreadable. He walked in and sat in the guest chair. "I wanted to ask you something," he said. She waited. "What's your endgame with all this?" "Define this." "Being here, rebuilding a company that once erased you." Jasmine rested her hands on the edge of the desk. "My goal was never to prove I belonged here," she said. "It was to make sure no one else had to prove it after me." He sat with that for a moment. "So, it's not personal?" "Oh, it's personal, but it's not emotional. I stopped bleeding over this place years ago. Now I'm just making sure it stops cutting others." Colton leaned back. "I admire that." "I didn't ask you to," she said gently. "Admiration doesn't heal what you ignored." His jaw tightened, but he didn't push. "I'm learning," he said. "Then let learning mean letting go," she said. "Of control, of guilt, of trying to rewrite history with charm." He let out a quiet breath. "You know, 5 years ago, I thought strength meant not feeling anything, especially not at work." Jasmine nodded. "I remember. I don't think that anymore." "Good," she said, "because I stopped shrinking to make men like you feel big." She sat across from him, folding her arms. "Do you know what I really wanted back then?" she asked. "No. A mentor," she said. "Not a man who watched me burn out and said nothing. Not someone who took from me in private and discarded me in public." He looked away. "I was loyal to you, Colton, and you turned that loyalty into a liability. I was wrong." She leaned forward. "You weren't just wrong, you were quiet. That's worse." Silence filled the room. Then she stood. "If you ever want to earn the respect you lost, start by speaking up for someone who doesn't have the same access you do. And don't wait 5 years next time." He nodded. As she opened the door for him, he paused. "You're still the most remarkable strategist I've ever worked with." She raised a brow. "Then you should have made room for me at the table, before I had to build my own." That night, Jasmine met with her team to finalize the second phase of brand recovery. As they reviewed deliverables and timelines, one of her analysts smiled. "You know you've changed the way people here talk, right?" She gave a small laugh. "If that's true, they'll forget it by next quarter." He shook his head. "No, you didn't just change the language. You made the culture shift." She paused. For a moment, she let herself feel it. The small win, the quiet justice, the dignity of being respected without having to fight for it every second. As the team left, she stayed behind, walking slowly through the empty hallways. The same halls where she once used to stay quiet, smile small, say thank you for every crumb of recognition. Now, she walked with her full height. No shame, no fear. And even if Colton never earned her back, she had already won. Not because she came back stronger, but because she came back free. Jasmine sat across from the company's head of internal communications, arms folded, tone firm. This isn't just about cleaning up a press statement. It's about owning the truth. If we don't lead with sincerity, everything else falls apart. The woman shifted in her seat. But do you think the public is ready for that much transparency? Jasmine didn't flinch. We're not doing this for applause. We're doing it to stop hiding. The door cracked open. Colton stepped in slowly, holding a thin folder. Jasmine didn't look his way. "I'll send you the revised language by noon," she said. "And don't polish the edges. Let it sound human." The woman nodded and exited quickly. Colton walked in, setting the folder on her desk. Revised equity data. "I thought you'd want to see it before your investor briefing." She glanced at the numbers. "Good. We'll need to simplify the language on slides 3 and 4. He stayed quiet, watching her. "You look tired," he finally said. Jasmine looked up. "Being excellent in a place that once tried to erase you will do that to a person." He nodded. "I didn't come here to defend the past." "Good," she said, standing. "Because I've stopped debating it." She walked past him, heading for the large boardroom. He followed, but 2 steps behind. Not because she asked, but because that's what respect looks like now. Inside the boardroom, the senior team had gathered. Compliance, marketing, operations, legal. Jasmine took the lead as usual. Colton stood against the back wall, watching. "The message isn't just what we say publicly," she explained. "It's what your employees overhear in the hallway, what the press interprets when the camera cuts off, and what your investors assume when your body language doesn't match your prepared statement." Her tone was measured, not performative. She didn't entertain power plays. When a senior exec tried to interrupt her, Jasmine held up a hand without raising her voice. "I wasn't finished." The room quieted instantly. Colton watched the man's face turn red, but Jasmine didn't shift. Later, after the meeting cleared, Colton caught up with the man in the hallway. "She always this sharp?" the exec asked, half annoyed, half impressed. Colton gave him a look. "She was sharper when you ignored her 5 years ago." The man raised a brow. Colton continued walking. Back in her office, Jasmine reviewed a new report. Numbers were climbing. Positive mentions. Recovery signals. Industry analysts were beginning to speak favorably again. Her phone buzzed with a message from a former coworker, one who used to doubt her every word. "I can't believe they made you leave back then. You're saving them now." She didn't respond, because the truth was, she hadn't come to save them. She'd come to protect what they couldn't afford to lose again. Integrity. That afternoon, she found Colton in the rooftop lounge, a space he rarely used. He looked up as she stepped out, unsure if she'd walk past. She didn't. She stopped beside him, arms folded. "I heard you spoke up in today's junior staff roundtable," she said. He nodded. "They had ideas no one was listening to. That used to be you." "I know," she said. "I'm trying to make sure it doesn't happen again." "Why now?" she asked. Colton looked out at the skyline. "Because I finally realized I don't want to be the kind of leader people fear. I want to be the kind they respect. And that starts by listening." Jasmine said nothing. "I used to think leadership was about being the loudest voice in the room," he added. "Turns out it's about knowing when not to speak." A long silence passed between them. Then she asked, "What would you have done differently if you could go back?" He turned to her. "Everything." She shook her head. "Be specific." "I would have stood beside you in that meeting," he said. "I would have told the board the proposal was yours. I would have stopped hiding what we had behind strategy and silence." He paused. "And I wouldn't have let you walk out of that building alone." Jasmine looked away. "I did walk out alone," she said. "And that was the most painful and powerful thing I ever did." "I know," he said softly. "You watched me leave, Colton. That part will always belong to you. He looked down. I don't expect you to erase that, she added. But I do expect you to carry it. I am, he whispered. Every day. For once, she believed him. She didn't say it aloud, but the way her shoulders dropped, the way her hands unclenched slightly at her sides, said enough. I have a meeting, she said. Will I see you after? I'll be in the building. Whether you see me or not is up to you. She walked off, heels steady on the concrete, and for the first time since she returned, Colton didn't feel powerless in her presence. He felt accountable, the kind that sticks, the kind that grows, the kind that says, maybe it's not too late to change, even if it's too late to go back. The investor call was scheduled for 10 a.m., and Jasmine was already seated at the table 15 minutes early. She didn't fidget. She didn't rehearse out loud. She just reviewed the updated brand roadmap with a calmness that unnerved even the most seasoned executives around her. Colton entered quietly. No commanding entrance, no attention-seeking energy. He sat beside Jasmine, not above her, not across from her, and opened his folder. When the call began, Jasmine led the presentation. There was no fluff in her voice, no corporate lingo that muddied the truth. Just direct, clear language backed by real data. In the past 60 days, Bryce Consolidated has lost more than profit. It's lost the trust that allows it to grow, she said. What you'll hear today is not a pitch. It's a path. You don't have to believe me. Just believe the numbers and the change behind them. The investors asked sharp questions. She answered sharper. When one asked if the company had truly learned from its public mishandlings, Colton leaned into the mic. We did more than learn, he said. We're changing how we lead. That starts by giving power to the people who should have had it all along. He didn't look at Jasmine when he said it, but he didn't have to. Everyone on the call heard it. After the meeting, the feedback started rolling in. Positive investor sentiment. A bump in share price. Internal morale lifted. Jasmine stood in the hallway outside the executive floor, watching Junior. Staff huddle over the newly released messaging framework she created. They were excited, energized, the way she used to be when she first started here. Colton approached slowly. Nice work, he said. She nodded. It's not about nice, Colton. It's about necessary. He smiled. You always say exactly what people need to hear. She turned to him. You used to ignore that. You'd say I was too direct. I was insecure, he admitted. And now I'm just listening. She studied him for a moment, then walked past him toward the elevator. Colton followed her inside. The doors closed. They stood in silence for a beat, the kind of silence that didn't hurt, the kind that held possibility. I've been thinking about the night before that pitch, he said. Jasmine didn't respond, but she didn't stop him either. I knew it was the beginning of something, he added. That's what scared me. I thought I had to choose between having you and having control. Her voice was soft but steady. So you chose control. He looked at the floor and lost both. The elevator stopped on her floor. She didn't step out immediately. You didn't lose me because you were scared, she said. You lost me because you let that fear decide for you. She walked out. He stayed behind, doors closing once again. That night, Jasmine joined a virtual panel for Black women in business. Her words were candid, firm. We don't just break glass ceilings, she told the audience. We walk over the shards every day and still lead with grace. That's not resilience. That's exhaustion turned into purpose. The comment went viral. People began tagging Bryce Consolidated in tweets and LinkedIn posts, praising their decision to bring her in. Journalists reached out for interviews. Panels invited her. Podcasts called. But Jasmine declined most of them. She didn't want fame. She wanted her peace. She had earned it the hard way. The next morning, Colton left a note on her desk. Not handwritten. Typed. Simple. Jasmine, you're doing more than saving this company. You're showing me how to lead. Thank you. See. She didn't respond. But she didn't throw it away either. The day moved fast. Jasmine was pulled into interviews, briefs, team huddles. She didn't slow down until the evening when she walked into the quiet of the top-floor terrace and found Colton again. This time, he wasn't waiting. He was working. Laptop open, not on spreadsheets, but on a speech draft, a real one, personal. She stepped beside him. "You're rewriting your next press appearance." He nodded. "I realized I've never told my story without hiding behind performance." She raised an eyebrow. "You're learning." "I'm trying." "Don't try," she said. "Decide." He closed the laptop. "I've decided I don't want to repeat the version of myself you had to leave." Jasmine's eyes softened, but she kept her voice even. "I didn't leave because of who you were, Colton. I left because of what you chose in the moment that counted." He nodded. "I'm still counting." "I know." Silence. Then she asked, "If I had stayed, do you think you would have changed?" "No," he said, "because comfort never forces growth." She didn't smile, but her eyes lingered on him for a moment longer. "Good," she said. "That means there's hope." She turned to go, but paused again. "This version of you? The one who listens, the one who shows up?" He leaned in slightly. "Yes? Don't let it disappear the moment I walk away." She walked off into the elevator. Colton stayed. For once, he didn't feel like he was chasing her. He felt like he was walking towards something better. And that, maybe for the first time, was enough. The company culture was changing, and fast. Not because of a memo, not because of a policy, but because Jasmine was in the building. The shift was subtle at first. More open conversations, clearer emails, junior employees feeling confident enough to speak in meetings without checking over their shoulder. And then came something new, transparency briefings. Twice a week, Jasmine invited department leads, new hires, and even interns into open Q&A sessions. No scripts, no egos, just honest, direct answers. People responded to it. One intern asked, "Why haven't we done this before?" Jasmine's answer was clean, because when power isn't challenged, it becomes lazy. Colton sat quietly in the back during each session, never announcing himself, never interrupting, just listening and learning. He started following up with staff afterward, not to manage, but to support, not to direct, but to understand. He took Jasmine's words to heart, and for the first time in years, his leadership wasn't being feared or flattered. It was being felt. One afternoon, Jasmine was pulled into a meeting with compliance. A data oversight had triggered a regulatory inquiry. Normally, this would have caused panic. But her response? "I don't fix lies," she said calmly. "I rewrite the truth in a way people can believe." She worked late that night, drafting a response strategy. Her eyes were tired, but her focus never wavered. Around 9 p.m., Colton stepped into her office with 2 cups of coffee, her favorite, black with 1 shot of espresso. She didn't thank him, but she took the cup. "You ever sleep?" he asked. "When I feel like the day's work won't come back to bite me." He nodded. "That's fair." He sat across from her and waited. "I heard about compliance," he said. "I handled it. I know you did. And I wanted you to know I would have fallen apart in your position 5 years ago." She didn't look up. "You did fall apart. You just did it quietly and let others take the damage." He swallowed. "I know." They sat in silence, sipping coffee. Then she asked, "Why are you still here?" He hesitated. "Because I don't want to go home still pretending I've done enough." She glanced at him. "Guilt isn't growth, Colton. But it's a start." That night, he didn't stay to push. He left her to her work. And for once, she didn't feel cornered by his presence. She felt witnessed. The next morning, the company's internal newsletter quoted Jasmine for the first time on record. Accountability isn't about blame. It's about recognizing where trust was lost and walking it back one step at a time. The quote was placed beneath her photo, not a press headshot, but a real one, taken during her open session, her mouth mid-sentence, her eyes sharp, her expression calm. She looked like the future. And for many inside Bryce Consolidated, that's exactly what she was. Later that day, Jasmine reviewed the redesigned branding deck. The tone was finally shifting, less corporate, more human. She made a few adjustments, then forwarded the final version to the board with no commentary. She didn't need applause. She needed results. Colton found her standing outside the break room, reading a printout someone had taped to the wall. It was a feedback letter from a former client, thanking the company for owning up to their previous missteps. She folded the page and handed it to him. "That's your win," he said. "No," she replied. "That's the company's second chance. I'm just the translator." He chuckled. "You always were." She looked at him, this time with no edge in her voice. "I used to dream of someone like you saying those words," she admitted. "Now, I don't need them. I know. And that's what makes them mean something." The vulnerability in her honesty made Colton take a step back, not physically, but emotionally. He was no longer talking to the woman he once hurt. He was speaking to the woman who had already healed, with or without him. It made him respect her even more. That afternoon, Colton gathered the senior team, not to command, but to listen. He opened the meeting by saying, "From now on, every major decision needs to pass a test. Would we stand behind this if Jasmine weren't in the room?" The room went still, but no one questioned it. And for the first time in years, the company wasn't running on fear. It was running on integrity. That night, Colton stayed behind and looked out the window of his office. He watched Jasmine exit the building below, coat draped over her arm, hair loose around her shoulders, stride steady. He didn't call out to her, didn't text, didn't chase. Because what she had given back to him wasn't hers to give in the first place. It was the example of what leadership could look like if he was brave enough to follow it. And that was exactly what he intended to do. The next morning, Colton surprised the operations team by showing up to their first floor planning meeting. No suit, no assistant, just him and a notebook. The room tensed the moment he entered, but Jasmine, already seated at the far end, didn't flinch. He took the last empty seat beside the assistant project coordinator, a 25-year-old woman who blinked twice, clearly trying to figure out if she was in the right meeting. "You're early," Jasmine said, as she flipped open her own notebook. "I'm curious," he replied. "You've been doing things I should have learned to do years ago." Her expression didn't change. "You're welcome to watch, but don't center yourself." "Understood." The meeting began, and for an entire hour, Colton didn't speak once. He didn't cut anyone off. He didn't reframe ideas. He didn't ask loaded questions. He listened. The team walked through upcoming changes, shift restructuring, holiday workload balance, system gaps. Jasmine guided the discussion, redirecting when needed, asking the kind of questions that showed she cared about how things worked on the ground level, not just in the boardroom. By the time the meeting ended, the staff looked energized, not because Colton had been there, but because he hadn't made himself the reason they were. He stood, thanked everyone, and quietly exited. No spotlight, no speech, just presence. Later, Jasmine passed him in the hallway. "You kept your word," she said. He looked over. "About what?" "Not centering yourself." "I'm learning," he said. She nodded. "We'll see if it sticks." That night, he hosted a private meeting with the department heads. There were no catered lunches, no formal agenda. Just one topic: what have we been ignoring? At first, silence. Then a hand went up. Then two. Then stories poured out. About the overlooked team member who'd been sitting on a game-changing idea for months. About the broken internal review system that punished honest feedback. About the way HR complaints were swept aside if they came from lower-level employees. Colton didn't speak for over an hour. He took notes, and then he stood. This company's been operating on habit, and most of those habits have protected power, not progress. No one dared move. From this point forward, he continued, we don't promote titles, we promote trust. No one will be rewarded for silence anymore, especially not mine. The heads nodded slowly, some glancing at one another. Change was coming. Real change. And it wasn't coming from a press release. It was coming from discomfort, from the truth, from Jasmine's influence. Later that week, an email circulated company-wide. It was short, clear, and bold. Subject: New Leadership Value Policy from Office of the CEO. Starting this quarter, every senior leader's evaluation will include peer and junior level feedback. Promotion eligibility will no longer be based solely on tenure, revenue, or role, but on the ability to lead with trust, inclusion, and accountability. Leadership without credibility is a liability. That ends now. Jasmine read the email alone in her office. Her phone buzzed seconds later. One of her team members from Seattle had sent her a single message. "This has your fingerprints all over it." She smiled, but she didn't respond. It wasn't her moment to claim. It was the company's chance to rise. Colton walked into her office later that afternoon with no coffee, no file, no excuse. "I owe you more than an apology," he said. Jasmine looked up from her laptop. "You've given one already." "Yeah, but this is different." She closed the screen. "Go on." "I used to see you as someone I had to manage," he said. "Someone who had potential, but needed refining." Her eyes didn't move. "And I realize now," he continued, "that the only thing you needed was room. Room to lead, room to speak, room to exist without someone cutting your sentences short. And yet," she said, "you still took that room anyway." "I did," he said, "but I see it now. I see you now. Not as a memory, not as guilt, but as someone I want to follow." She tilted her head slightly. "That's not what you wanted 5 years ago." "No," he said, "but I didn't know back then that the best leaders know when to step aside." Jasmine stood and walked around the desk, standing in front of him. "You were never afraid of my ambition," she said. "You were afraid of what it made you question about yourself." He nodded slowly. "But the version of you standing here now," she added, "he's useful. Not because he wants to fix what's broken between us, but because he finally sees what needed fixing in himself." He took that in with a breath. "Thank you," he said. Jasmine didn't reply. She didn't need to. Her presence was still the loudest answer in the room. As he turned to go, she spoke once more. "Colton." He looked back. "You don't have to keep proving something to me," she said. "Just don't go back to being the man who couldn't stand beside me." "I won't," he said. "Not ever again." That evening, Jasmine walked the halls alone before heading out for the day. She paused at the same elevator she once stepped into 5 years ago. Jobless, heart bruised, dignity cracked. But this time, when the doors opened, she stood taller and walked in with her head high. No fear, no silence, no shame. She didn't need a witness, because now she was her own proof. The next board meeting wasn't supposed to be anything special, just quarterly reviews, forecasts, investor sentiment updates. But when Jasmine stepped into the room, the atmosphere shifted. She wore a slate-grey blouse tucked into tailored black trousers. No jewelry, no dramatics. But everyone noticed when she entered. And when she sat down at the head of the table instead of beside it, no one corrected her. Colton came in a minute later. He saw her sitting where he normally would. And he didn't say a word. He took the seat 2 places down. A few of the members exchanged looks, but Jasmine ignored them. "The numbers you'll see today," she began, "aren't just good. They're earned." She clicked through a revised deck that broke down public trust recovery, employee retention trends, and growing media sentiment favorability. One slide stood out. Q2 confidence index, 19.3%. Someone asked, "Can we attribute all of this to messaging?" Jasmine's answer was clear. Not messaging. Culture. Language is a mirror. We changed what we believed about ourselves, and the world believed it too. Colton leaned back, watching her speak. There was a time when her confidence would have made him feel threatened. Now, it made him feel responsible. When the meeting ended, the chairman smiled at Jasmine. "You've done exceptional work here." She nodded. "Thank you." The compliment bounced off her. She didn't linger in it. She didn't shrink from it. Outside the room, Colton walked with her in the hallway. "You handled that well." "It's not about handling," she said. "It's about holding. Holding the room, holding the facts, holding people accountable. He nodded, walking beside her. "Do you remember that trip to Austin?" he asked. She glanced over. "The logistics conference." "Yeah, you stayed up till 2 a.m., fixing a pitch that wasn't even yours." "You slept through my edits," she said, a slight edge in her voice. "I did. I remember every detail," she added. "Every time I gave more than I was paid for. Every time I gave more than I was valued for." He didn't defend himself. He didn't soften it. "I thought I was teaching you how to survive," he said quietly. "But you already knew how." She stopped walking. "No, what you taught me was how to disappear with grace. That lesson nearly broke me." A silence stretched between them. "I didn't know I was hurting you like that," he said. "You didn't bother to know," she replied. "That's worse." She turned to leave, but he reached, not to stop her, just to slow the moment. "Would it matter if I told you I hate who I was back then?" She paused. "It would matter more if I saw who you are now." He nodded slowly. "Then let me keep showing you." Jasmine didn't answer. She simply walked away, but she didn't walk as fast. Later that afternoon, a new employee orientation session began in the main hall. Normally, these were routine. Quick intros, HR policies, code of conduct. But today, Jasmine decided to speak. She stood at the front of the room. "Welcome," she began. "If no one told you this before you got hired, your voice belongs here." The room went still. This company used to reward silence. It used to confuse compliance with contribution. That's changed. One of the new hires raised a hand. "What if we don't feel heard?" Jasmine smiled slightly. "You speak louder. And if no one listens, you come find me." She ended with no dramatic close, just truth. Colton watched from the back, and again, didn't speak. That evening, he sat alone in his office. A photo frame sat face down on his desk, the one of him shaking hands with a former investor who no longer answered his calls. He turned it upright again. But instead of focusing on the past, he opened his notepad. He wrote a single sentence. "Leadership is no longer about my name. It's about the people brave enough to hold me accountable." He stared at the line, then sent it in an internal memo. Company-wide, no review, no polish, no PR filter, just truth. He'd learned that from her. Jasmine received the email while reviewing campaign deliverables. She read it once, then again, and finally, she smiled. Only for a moment, but it was the first time she did since she came back. The next morning, the office buzzed, not from panic or performance, but from surprise. Colton's message had landed in every inbox. Simple, raw, stripped of corporate gloss. And people noticed. He walked into the building that day without his usual suit jacket, without his assistant pacing behind him. Just him, and a calmness that made people look twice. He was no longer trying to be impressive. He was learning to be present. Jasmine was already at her desk, reading through revisions from the comms team. A younger employee knocked and poked their head in. "Miss Rhodes?" She looked up. "I just wanted to say, that memo he sent?" It felt like something shifted. Jasmine offered a soft nod. "Then hold him to it." They smiled. "I will." When they left, she leaned back in her chair and glanced at her monitor. She'd been staring at the same sentence for 10 minutes. You can forgive someone in silence and still keep your boundaries intact. She wasn't sure if she believed it fully yet, but she was learning to try. Later that day, Colton walked into her office holding 2 waters. He placed one on her desk without speaking. Jasmine arched a brow. "You're quiet," she said. "Trying to say less," he replied. "Trying not to ask for anything?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Exactly that." She set the water aside. "So, what brings you here?" "I wanted to give you something. Unless it's a public apology or a budget increase, I'm not sure I need it." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. No company letterhead, no signature, just ink on soft cream paper. She unfolded it slowly. Her eyes scanned it once. Then again. "You remember this?" he asked. She didn't answer at first. It was a letter. The one she had started to write to him 5 years ago and never sent. A goodbye note she had typed on her last day but deleted from her company drive. But he had printed it before she wiped the file. He'd kept it all this time. "I found it the day after you left," he said. "I never told anyone." Her voice was quiet. "I didn't think you ever saw it." "I did." She folded it again. Her hands were steady. "I meant every word," she said. "I know. You weren't supposed to read it." "I wasn't supposed to hurt you," he said. A pause. He stepped back. "I'm not giving this to you because I want a moment," he said. "I'm giving it back because it never belonged to me." He turned and left her alone with it. For a long time, she just sat there, the folded letter resting on her palm like a weight and a release at once. That evening, she walked into the conference room for the final prep session on the brand's national relaunch. The mood was light, but focused. Colton entered late. He didn't take a seat at the table. He stood by the wall, silent, watching her lead. This was her floor now. She directed timelines, assigned points of contact, laid out contingency strategies. At one point, a lead developer interrupted her with a suggestion that directly contradicted her proposed sequence. The room held its breath. But Jasmine didn't react with sharpness. She invited the idea forward, listened, then offered a clear rebuttal grounded in logic, not ego. The developer nodded. "Thank you for considering it." She didn't smile, but her tone softened. "Thank you for contributing." When the meeting ended, people stayed to talk, not because they were required, but because they wanted to understand how she thought. She exited the room 10 minutes later, finding Colton still standing by the wall. "You didn't interrupt once," she said as they walked. "I didn't need to," he said. "You used to correct people mid-sentence. I used to think I knew everything." She gave a small laugh. "Growth looks good on you." He looked over. "So does peace on you." They reached the elevator. "Are you riding down?" she asked. He shook his head. "No, I've got some calls." Jasmine stepped in, then paused before the doors closed. "Colton." He met her eyes. "You don't have to prove anything anymore." He nodded slowly. "Neither do you." The doors closed. Downstairs, she stepped out onto the sidewalk. For once, the wind didn't chill her. She pulled her coat tighter, not out of defense, but rhythm. She passed the old bench she used to sit on after late nights, back when she couldn't afford cabs, back when she'd replay every meeting in her head, wondering if she spoke too much, pushed too hard, made someone uncomfortable by existing too boldly. She paused for a second, staring at it. And then she kept walking. Inside, Colton looked out the window. He didn't reach for his phone. He didn't ask for her attention. He just watched her walk forward, unapologetic, uninterrupted, unchased. And that, he realized, was what freedom really looked like. Have you ever heard someone say, "I'm sorry," but deep down, you knew they still didn't get it? Accountability isn't about big speeches or second chances. It's about showing up differently, consistently, without asking to be seen as a hero. Let me ask you, have you ever forgiven someone quietly? Have you had to rebuild without ever receiving an apology? Or worse, did someone finally apologize, and you realized you'd already outgrown needing it? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit like if Jasmine's strength spoke to you. Share this with someone who needs the reminder. You don't need closure from them. You need clarity with yourself. And if you haven't already, tap subscribe. The next chapter of Jasmine's journey? It's not about return. It's about rising. It started with a small shift, one Jasmine almost didn't notice. At the Monday morning operations briefing, a young data analyst spoke up first. No nerves, no apology for interrupting. Just a clean, clear point backed by facts, and no one brushed it off. Not the director beside her, not the finance lead at the head of the table. Definitely not Colton. He simply nodded and said, "Good catch. Let's run with that." Jasmine sat at the far end, arms folded, silently watching. This was different. The culture she'd been modeling wasn't just visible now, it was alive. After the meeting, the analyst approached her. "Thank you," she said, a little breathless. "For what?" "For making this a place where I felt I could speak." Jasmine gave a single nod. "Now keep speaking." That was all. No hugs, no warm stories. Just a quiet affirmation. She'd never needed to be the face of change. She just wanted to clear the path so others wouldn't have to bleed the way she did. Down the hall, Colton was reviewing a new hiring protocol with HR. For the first time, the policy now included language Jasmine had once suggested, years ago, language that valued inclusive leadership styles over volume or charm. He didn't take credit for the shift, didn't mention her name in the policy note. But when the new doc was approved, Jasmine received a quiet email with no subject line. Just 2 words in the body. "It's done." She replied with one word, "Good." The healing wasn't loud. It was deliberate, and still ongoing. That afternoon, she met with an outside PR team for final checks before the public relaunch of Bryce Consolidated's brand message. The campaign tagline had been carefully crafted. "We don't rewrite history. We take responsibility for it." Jasmine stood by the glass wall, reviewing mock-ups. The designs were clean, simple. Every headline paired with internal reforms they had executed, not just promised. Colton entered mid-review. He didn't interrupt. He just stood beside her, hands in his pockets, quiet. After a few minutes, he spoke. "This feels different." "It is," Jasmine said, "because this time, truth is the message." He nodded. "You'd be proud of the way your leadership deck has been circulating. Teams are referencing it in strategy meetings." "I didn't write it for attention," she said. "I wrote it to make the silence stop." He looked at her then. "Do you still hear it sometimes?" The silence. She didn't answer right away. "I used to hear it after every meeting where I wasn't acknowledged," she said. "After every email you forwarded without copying my name. After every time I got told I was too direct." Colton lowered his gaze. "I remember. And now," she added, "now I don't hear silence. I hear my own name spoken in rooms where it used to be avoided." A pause. "That must feel good," he said. "It feels earned," she replied. "And that's better." Outside the window, traffic moved in waves. The city kept going, and so did she. As they walked back toward the executive floor, Jasmine stopped beside the old intern desk, the same one she used to sit at her first year there. The desk was empty now, awaiting new hires. "I used to eat lunch right here," she said. Colton nodded. "I know. You used to walk right past me." He said nothing. She smiled, but it was distant, reflective. "I used to wonder if being seen meant being safe." Colton turned to her. "And now? Now I know better. Being seen is just step 1. Being respected is the goal." He folded his arms. "I respect you more now than I ever have." Jasmine looked over, expression unreadable. "Then act like it." He held her gaze. "How?" "By never forgetting what it took for me to come back here and not shrink." She walked off again, heels tapping the floor, not for sound, but for rhythm. Each step was hers. Later that evening, Colton sat in a small breakout room with 2 managers from customer experience. They were venting, not about Jasmine, but about how high the bar had become since she arrived. "She's intense," one of them said. "Smart, no nonsense. She expects more from us than we're used to giving." Colton leaned forward. "Then rise," he said, "because she's not the problem. Your comfort is." They went quiet. He stood and added, "If she can walk in here after being dismissed, disrespected and ignored, and still lead with clarity, the least you can do is not complain that she expects you to do your job." And with that, he left them sitting there, stunned. Jasmine didn't know about the meeting. She didn't need to, because change wasn't about who said what behind closed doors. It was about what happened when she wasn't in the room. And Colton, he was finally using his voice for something other than himself. By midweek, the shift inside Bryce Consolidated was unmistakable. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was in the way conversations changed, in the way people paused before speaking, choosing clarity over defensiveness. In the way junior staff didn't shrink when they made a mistake, because the culture no longer punished vulnerability with silence. Jasmine walked the halls like a mirror. Everyone who passed her straightened up, not out of fear, but because they knew she would notice if something was off, and she'd call it out, with composure, not cruelty. That kind of leadership stayed with people long after the meeting ended. Colton had begun walking through the building at different times, choosing new routes, stepping into departments he used to overlook, not to monitor, not to check, just to be present. At the design wing, he noticed a new team brainstorming on a floor-to-ceiling whiteboard. Their language was clean, inclusive, rooted in community. He smiled faintly. It sounded like Jasmine. One of the senior associates noticed him and asked, "Mr. Bryce, would you like to weigh in?" He shook his head. "You're doing exactly what I hoped for. Keep going." He left without saying anything else. Sometimes the best contribution is walking away without centering yourself. That evening, Jasmine stepped into the elevator and found Colton already inside. He stepped back, giving her space without comment. The silence between them wasn't heavy anymore, just full. "People are watching you," she said. "I know. Some still expect you to snap back to who you were. I expect it too sometimes," he admitted. She glanced at him. "The difference now?" "What?" "You stop yourself." He nodded once. "Because I remember what it cost." The elevator reached the ground floor. Jasmine walked out first, but this time she paused. "Where are you headed?" he asked. "Rooftop. Alone?" "Always." He nodded, but didn't follow. Outside, she stood near the edge, arms crossed, city lights flickering beneath her feet. For a while, she just stared, not thinking, not solving, not protecting anyone. Just being. She hadn't had that before, not in this city, not in this building. But now she had a rhythm no one could take from her. Colton stood at his window on the top floor, looking out in the direction of the rooftop. He didn't text, didn't call, didn't ask to join. He simply stayed where he was, letting her space remain hers. And that, more than anything, marked how far he'd come. The next morning, a new company-wide initiative launched, VOICE Visible. Open, inclusive, credible, empowered. It was built from the frameworks Jasmine had piloted during her consulting phase, but now it would live as an internal program. Jasmine's name wasn't plastered on the rollout materials, but everyone knew who built it. When the announcement went live, she didn't even blink. She kept working. She had decks to finalize, interns to mentor, policies to cross-check. She didn't need recognition. She needed consistency. At noon, Colton dropped off a sealed envelope on her desk. She opened it after he left. Inside was a short message, handwritten. "You didn't change the culture. You reminded it who it should have been all along." See, no signature, no flourish, just truth. She folded the note once, set it in her drawer, and closed it softly. No tears, no hesitation, just a small nod to herself. Later that afternoon, a press reporter called the communications office, requesting a feature on Jasmine for an upcoming leadership issue. The office forwarded the request to her. She declined. No explanation, no counteroffer. She didn't come back to be seen. She came back to hold space, to build better, to leave better, and she was doing exactly that. At the end of the day, as the building emptied out and the skyline grew dusky, Jasmine walked past Colton's office. The door was open. He looked up. "I thought you'd be gone by now," she said. "I stay late now. Keeps me honest." She gave a half smile. "That's dangerous. Sometimes quiet breeds excuses." "I know," he said. "But tonight, I'm not thinking about excuses. I'm thinking about legacy. Whose? Mine, yours, ours. This company's." She folded her arms at the doorway. "Legacy isn't a trophy," she said. "It's the story people tell when you're no longer in the room." Colton nodded. "I used to be scared of that story, and now Now I want to make sure it includes the truth." She gave one small nod, then stepped away. "Jasmine," he said as she turned. She paused. "I'm not asking for anything," he said. "I just want to say thank you for coming back, even when we didn't deserve it." She met his eyes. "I didn't come back for you. I know. I came back for me." And with that, she walked out, not as a woman who'd been broken, but as a woman who had rebuilt herself and didn't owe anyone the blueprints. The mood on the executive floor had shifted, not with panic, with quiet anticipation. Everyone knew Jasmine's contract was nearing its end. Just one more week, and she'd return to Seattle, to Rhodes Theory, to the life she rebuilt after walking away from this place. What no one was saying aloud, but everyone was feeling, was the same question: what happens when she's gone? Jasmine moved through the building as she always had, focused, efficient, precise. But Colton noticed the difference. She was wrapping things up: final reports, documentation, transition guidelines. Jasmine didn't leave anything undone. She had no intention of being needed after she left. He stopped by her office around noon, finding her reviewing a hiring audit she'd quietly pushed through weeks ago. Her desk was clean. No clutter, no personal items. "Looking at successors?" he asked. "I don't replace myself," she said, not looking up. "I build structures that don't collapse when I leave." He stepped closer. "Are you sure you want to go?" "I was sure before I got here. You've changed everything." "I didn't change anything," she replied. "I reminded this place what leadership looks like when it's not afraid of being uncomfortable." He nodded. She finally looked at him. "This company doesn't need me anymore. And that's how I know I did my job." There was a strange peace in her words. Not sadness, not pride, just completion. Colton sat down across from her. "Can I ask you something personal?" She raised a brow. "You always do. What did it feel like, that first day walking back in after 5 years?" She leaned back, thoughtful, like I'd outgrown the building but needed to walk through it anyway. Not for closure, but for clarity. "And did you find it?" "I found myself," she said. He looked down. "I think I'm still looking." She gave a faint smile. "Then stop looking for who you were. Start becoming who you were afraid to be." He took a breath. "Stay for dinner after the board presentation," he said. "Not for me. For the team." She hesitated, then nodded once. "If I feel like they're ready, I will." That was all she gave him. No promises, no opening, just a possibility. The following day, Jasmine led her final strategy alignment. She didn't announce it was her last. She didn't draw attention to herself. But when she ended the session with, "You'll be responsible for what happens next," several people understood. It was the baton pass. Later, while prepping for the board presentation, Colton reviewed the deck she sent. No fluff, no embellishments, just clean data, cultural shifts, impact metrics, and long-term accountability projections. It was everything the board needed to see, and nothing they could deny. During the meeting, Jasmine stood with calm confidence. The board listened closely, more closely than they had 5 years ago when they ignored her completely. She walked them through every slide, pausing only when necessary. She didn't sell anything. She didn't pitch. She just led. At the end, one of the older members asked, "Ms. Rhodes, would you consider staying on full-time?" Colton looked at her. So did the room. She didn't smile. "I came here to restore clarity," she said, "not to depend on it." "But you're part of this company now," another board member added. Jasmine folded her hands. "No, I'm part of its lesson, and my lesson is complete." No one challenged her after that. Because, how could they? Outside the room, Colton walked beside her toward the elevator. "You made that look easy." "It wasn't," she said. "But that's what mastery is. Making hard things look like breathwork." They reached her floor. Colton looked down. "You didn't answer about dinner." "I'll come," she said. "But not for celebration." "Then for what?" "To make sure your team knows how to carry the work forward." He nodded. "Fair enough." That night, The private dinner wasn't flashy. No champagne, no speeches. Just a long oak table, soft lighting, and the people who'd worked under Jasmine's guidance for the past several weeks. One by one, they stood to thank her, not with flattery, but with specifics. You made it okay to question the process. You showed me that clarity isn't cold, it's kind. You reminded us that showing up fully isn't a risk, it's a right. Jasmine didn't respond to each. She just listened. And when it was her turn to speak, she stood slowly. I didn't come here to be liked, she began. I came here to create space, for truth, for dignity, for accountability. She paused. And if you forget everything else I said, remember this: culture doesn't collapse in one day. It collapses slowly, when people stop protecting what matters. Don't stop. Silence filled the room. And then, a long, respectful applause. Not loud, but lasting. Colton stood near the door as she finished speaking. He didn't approach her, didn't follow her when she stepped outside for air. He just stayed back and watched the people she changed. That was her legacy. Not words, not wins. People. Jasmine sat at the edge of the hotel balcony, the early morning sun barely warming her skin. Below, Manhattan stirred, cars honking, vendors setting up, voices carrying through crisp fall air. But inside her, it was quiet. Still, like she had finally stopped running. Cole's jacket still hung over her shoulders from last night. She hadn't meant to wear it home, but when he placed it over her after she'd said she was cold, she hadn't returned it. She hadn't wanted to. She kept replaying his words. You didn't fail me, Jasmine. You protected your peace. That's more than most people ever do. No man had ever said anything like that to her. Not in that tone. Not with that honesty. A soft knock came at her door. She opened it slowly, half expecting him. It was him. Cole, with coffee in hand, sleeves rolled up, and eyes softer than she remembered. I wasn't sure if you'd want to see me again this soon, he said. I was hoping you'd come, she replied, voice steady. He handed her the coffee, then stepped back. I didn't sleep much. She motioned him inside. Me either. They sat on opposite ends of the couch, not far, but not close enough for the tension to break. You always this calm after something that intense? He asked, cracking a tired smile. I used to cry, then I used to get angry. Now, I just breathe, she said. I'm not proud of how I acted at that event, he admitted. You didn't lie, you just didn't correct the story. He nodded. That's fair. A long pause. Cole reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded photo. This was in my wallet for 4 years. I didn't know I'd held on to it until yesterday. He handed it to her. It was a picture of her, taken at the rooftop of their former firm's holiday party. She was laughing at something off camera, unaware someone had captured her. Her natural curls were pinned back. She looked light, happy, untouched. Jasmine held the photo like it was glass. You kept this? She asked. Breath caught in her throat. I thought I moved on, but I didn't. And that's not your problem. I needed to show you. She looked up at him. Why now? Because 5 years ago, I let silence speak for me, and it said all the wrong things. She nodded slowly, trying to keep her composure. You broke me. I know. You never came after me. I didn't think I deserved to. Tears pressed behind her eyes. And now? Now I know I didn't. But I still want to try. She set the photo down on the coffee table and leaned back, staring at him. Cole, I'm not who I was back then. I'm counting on that. She stood. Then you need to understand something. I'm not looking for closure. I'm building boundaries. My heart's not open, just because you're finally ready. I'm not asking you to open it. I'm asking for a chance to earn your trust. Her body stilled. Don't answer now, he added. Just, if you ever need to know the truth about what happened back then, ask me. I won't dodge it again. She watched him rise and head for the door. Right before stepping out, he looked back. You were the best thing in my life, and I never said it. That's on me. Then he left. Later that afternoon, Jasmine walked through Bryant Park, needing air and motion. She didn't know what she was doing, didn't know what came next. All she knew was that something inside her cracked open last night, and now the light was pouring in. Her phone buzzed. "Cole, can I take you to dinner tomorrow? No expectations, just food, just us." Like we never got to do. She stared at the message for a long time, then typed, "Jasmine, one dinner, one conversation, that's all." She hit send and kept walking. But for the first time in a long while, her heart didn't feel like it was dragging behind her. It was moving with her. The restaurant Cole picked wasn't flashy or loud. It sat on a quiet block in Midtown, tucked between a florist and a bookstore. Inside, the lighting was low, the tables spaced generously apart. No chance of paparazzi or eavesdropping. Just two people, 5 years too late, trying to figure out if there was still something worth fighting for. Jasmine arrived first. She wore a deep emerald blouse tucked into high-waisted black pants, and her hair was in a soft twist. No makeup beyond lip gloss. No performance. Cole entered moments later in a navy coat and jeans, still polished but not rehearsed. When his eyes landed on her, his breath visibly hitched. "You look beautiful," he said without a beat. She nodded in acknowledgement, not flattered, not flinching. "Thank you." They ordered quietly. No appetizers, no wine. Just 2 plates of food neither would remember tasting. When the waiter stepped away, Cole leaned forward. "I know I hurt you. I don't expect forgiveness. But I want you to understand the truth." Jasmine met his eyes. "Then speak it." He inhaled, exhaled. "Back then, when I stopped calling, when I pulled away, it wasn't about you." "Please don't say that," she said, voice tight. "That line has ended more relationships than it's saved. I know. But this time, it's true. I didn't stop loving you, Jasmine. I stopped believing I was worthy of the way you loved me." She blinked. Cole looked down. "You remember when you brought me soup that week? I was sick and didn't ask for a single thing in return. Or how you stayed up helping my mom fill out medical forms. Or how you used to leave notes in my suit pocket before every pitch meeting." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Yes, I didn't know how to receive love like that. I thought I had to earn everything, that if I let someone give to me, they'd eventually ask for more than I could give back. So I distanced myself, pulled away before you could realize I wasn't enough." Jasmine swallowed. "You didn't even give me the chance to choose. I regret that more than anything." The table fell into silence. Then she asked, "What made you come back now?" He hesitated. "There was this moment, 6 months ago. I had this deal fall apart, and I was in the hospital for dehydration. My phone died, and I had no one listed as an emergency contact. Not one person I could count on." She frowned. "It hit me. I spent years building a name, a company, wealth, but I lost the only person who ever saw me when I had nothing." Jasmine looked away. "So you remembered me when you were down?" "No, I remembered you when I was real." Another silence passed. Then Jasmine asked, "What do you want from me, Cole?" His voice was steady. "A second chance, to know you again, to hear about your mornings, your work, your wins, your boundaries. I don't need the old Jasmine. I want the woman sitting in front of me right now." She felt her throat tighten. "I don't know if I can open that door," she said honestly. "I'm not asking you to open it, just don't lock it yet." After dinner, Cole walked her to her apartment. They didn't touch. They didn't hold hands. But there was an unmistakable gravity pulling between them. At her front steps, she turned to him. Tonight was honest. "Thank you," she said. "I'll never lie to you again," he promised. She looked him square in the eyes. "Then don't disappear. If you want to be here, be here." "I will." And then, without hesitation, Cole did the one thing she didn't expect. He stepped back, didn't ask to come up, didn't reach for her hand, didn't try to kiss her. He honored the space she needed. And for Jasmine, that respect said more than any apology ever could. The following days moved slowly. Cole didn't bombard her phone. No midnight calls, no grand gestures. Just one message each morning. thinking of you. Hope today feels peaceful, no pressure, no questions. For Jasmine, it was disarming. Men from her past rushed to possess her or win her back with things. Cole was trying something new. Patience. On Wednesday, she saw his name in her inbox again. Subject, thought of you when I read this. He'd attached a short article about an Atlanta-based wellness retreat for professional women. She had mentioned last year she wanted to open one someday. Beneath the link, he'd written, not a pitch, just a reminder that your dream is real, and it's waiting. Jasmine read that line 5 times. She didn't reply, but that night, she slept through without waking at 3 a.m. By Friday, Jasmine did something unexpected. She invited Cole to the community center, not as a romantic signal, but a test. She wanted to see how he handled the real her, the one who wiped tears from abandoned kids and packed donated hygiene kits for families in need. Cole showed up in dark jeans and a plain tee. No driver, no assistant, just him. She watched from across the hallway as he knelt to tie a loose shoelace on a boy whose parents were late picking him up. No fanfare, no waiting for recognition. Does this happen every day? He asked quietly as they handed out snacks in the after-school room. Most days, she said. Some kids just need a place where nobody asks them to prove they're worth caring about. He looked at her. You gave me that once. She didn't respond. But later that evening, as she wiped down a counter, she found a folded napkin under her phone. It read, "You still do, even when you don't know it." She pressed the napkin to her chest, then folded it carefully and slipped it into her coat pocket. That weekend, she let him take her for coffee. Public, safe, measured. They sat on the patio of a quiet cafe near Piedmont Park. This time, Jasmine spoke more. She told him about her non-profit work, the grant she applied for, the therapy she'd started, the boundaries she fought to keep. Cole listened, really listened. I don't want to be rescued, she said, stirring her tea. I don't want to be the rescuer, he replied. I just want to stand beside you. If you'll let me. She watched him for a beat, and then nodded, slightly. Sunday morning, he sent a photo of a book cover, The Way of Integrity, by Martha Beck. Caption, I'm trying to unlearn everything that made me lose you. Jasmine stared at it for a long time, then typed, start with chapter 4. That one hit me the hardest. For the first time since New York, their wounds felt like they weren't just scars, but spaces being filled with something new, still fragile, but honest. It was the middle of the week when Jasmine got the news. Her Seattle firm, Rhodes Theory, had just been shortlisted for a federal contract focused on crisis communications for underserved communities. It was the kind of project she'd always dreamed of, large enough to scale her team, meaningful enough to matter. When the confirmation came in, she was alone in her kitchen. No champagne, no party. She smiled, then called her assistant to schedule an internal briefing. The old Jasmine would have let the excitement sit. This Jasmine moved forward without pause. Later that evening, her phone rang. It was Cole. Did I just see Rhodes Theory on the federal shortlist? You did, she said simply. Congratulations. That's... Jasmine, that's huge. It is, she agreed. You don't sound excited. I am. Just focused. A beat. Do you want to celebrate? He asked. There was no hesitation in his tone, no possessiveness, just the quiet voice of a man who wanted to witness her win. I'm not sure what celebration looks like for me anymore, she admitted. But I'll meet you for dinner. Tomorrow. Tell me where, he said. And she did. They met at a low-key bistro on Atlanta's west side. No cameras, no reservations required. Jasmine wore a wide-leg ivory pant and sleeveless olive top, minimal jewelry. But Cole couldn't take his eyes off her. They talked about the grant, the center, his new mentorship initiative for young analysts inside Bryce. You've changed, she said, sipping water. I had to, he answered. You were the first mirror I ever looked into, and didn't like what I saw. She didn't smile at the compliment, but she didn't look away either. The air between them was calm, not the old tension, not the avoidance, but stillness, a space where truth could breathe. "After this project, I'm going back to Seattle for a while," she said. Cole nodded. "You should. You're not going to ask me to stay." "I want to," he said honestly. But I won't." "Why?" "Because anything I ask of you has to make room for who you are now, not who you were when we met." She tilted her head. "You really have been reading that book." He chuckled. They paid the bill and walked out together. Jasmine didn't say goodbye. She stood at the curb, waiting for her car. When it pulled up, Cole reached for the door. Before she got in, she looked at him. "I still don't know where this is going," she said. "Me either," he replied. "But for the first time, I'm okay letting it unfold." Her words weren't a promise, but they were enough. The next morning, Jasmine stood outside the community center, waiting for a delivery. A black SUV pulled up. Cole stepped out holding a brown box. "I heard you were short on books for the after-school girls group," he said. She blinked. "You came all the way out here to deliver books?" "I'm not good at waiting to see if people need me," he said. "I'm trying to learn to just show up." She took the box from his hands. Inside were 10 brand new journals. A printed note was taped to the top. "For every girl who's ever been told her voice is too much, too loud, or too soon. Write anyway." Jasmine touched the note, then looked at Cole. Her eyes softened. For once, the man who used to silence her had learned how to amplify others. He didn't try to kiss her. He didn't ask for anything. He just left the box in her care and walked back to his car. It was the most attractive thing he'd ever done. The center was finally open. What began as a single office in the back of a leased church space had grown into a full-scale resource hub. Jasmine stood outside watching women walk in, some smiling, some nervous, all of them carrying the weight of fresh starts. She stayed near the doorway, holding a clipboard, offering a word here and there. No spotlight, no speech, until she heard a familiar voice behind her. "You really did it." She turned. Cole stood there, a folder in his hand. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept, but his eyes were clear, focused. "You came?" she asked. "I needed to see it." "Why?" "Because the first time we ever talked about your dreams, I dismissed them," he said quietly. "This time, I wanted to be the kind of man who shows up to honor them." Jasmine didn't respond right away. She just nodded. "I brought something," he added, lifting the folder. Inside was a printed report, a private audit, his legal team's signature at the bottom. "I've divested from the firm. Effective this week." Her breath caught. "You what?" "Sold my majority shares. I've kept a silent partnership, but the decision-making, it's no longer mine." She blinked. "Why would you?" "Because Bryce isn't the kind of place I want to run anymore," he said. "And because I need to do the work, not just wear the title." "You gave it up?" "I'm building something smaller now, more intentional. Just a consultancy, no board, no power games. Just truth." Jasmine placed the folder on a nearby table and slowly exhaled. "You didn't have to do that for me." "I didn't," he said. "I did it because I couldn't sleep at night knowing I had the means to do better. And didn't." She looked up at him. And this time, when the silence stretched between them, it didn't ache. It calmed. They met again a week later. Not at her request, not at his, just a chance encounter at the park where the community ran weekend wellness sessions. Cole had shown up to volunteer. She'd shown up to teach a journaling class. When they crossed paths, neither moved. "Funny seeing you here," she said, setting down her bag. "I guess we run in the same circles now." She studied him. No suit? He wore jeans, a plain shirt, and carried a cooler full of water bottles. "Hard to pass out drinks in a blazer," he said. She smiled. "A real one." He watched her carefully. "You're different," he said. "So are you." She sat down on the grass. He did too. For a long time, they didn't say anything, just listened to the hum of kids playing mothers chatting, yoga mats unrolling in the distance. Eventually, she leaned back on her hands. "Did you mean it?" she asked. "What? That you're not asking me to stay? That whatever this is, it's up to both of us." "I meant it," he said. "Even if I go back to Seattle? Even if you never come back?" She turned to him. "What if I do?" His gaze didn't waver. "Then we figure it out," he said. There were no fireworks, no dramatic music, just the sun warming their faces, and a shared peace between two people who had finally stopped running from each other and from themselves. That night, Jasmine sat on her couch, staring at a plane ticket. She was scheduled to leave in 3 days, but everything inside her felt unfinished, not because of Cole, because of what she still wanted to build here. She picked up her phone and called her assistant. "Reschedule the Seattle return. I'm extending my stay." "For how long?" the woman asked. Jasmine smiled. "I'll let you know." Then she opened her laptop, drafted a new proposal, and titled it Phase 2, because her story didn't end when Cole broke her. It began when she chose to rebuild on her own terms. And this time, the love that followed wasn't possession. It was partnership. 3 months later, a community gala honored Rhodes Theory's impact. The venue was small, decorated with handwritten quotes from women who'd gone through the center's programs. Jasmine stood in the corner, wearing a soft blue dress. Cole found her there, hands in his pockets. "You're glowing," he said. "It's peace," she replied. He reached for her hand, and this time she didn't pull away. "You ready?" he asked. She looked around, at the women, the stories, the change, then back at him. "I am now." He kissed her hand, slow and reverent. Not because he owned her, but because he knew what it meant to love a woman who belonged to herself. And Jasmine, she finally knew what it felt like to be seen, not saved. If you've ever walked away from someone who didn't value you, if you've ever had to rebuild your life in silence, with no applause, then Jasmine's story was for you. She didn't wait for closure. She didn't beg to be chosen. She chose herself, then built something no one could take. And when love returned, it came with humility, not control. That's what healing looks like. That's what growth sounds like. If this story moved you, take a second to tap that like button. Drop a comment. Tell us your favorite moment or life lesson. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you haven't yet, subscribe for more real, raw, and redemptive love stories like this. Because on this channel, we don't just tell stories. We tell the truth about heartbreak, power, and what it means to love yourself first. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next one.